The Watsons Go to Birmingham 1963 opens on a freezing cold day in Flint, Michigan. The mood inside the Watsons' home, though, is warm and inviting. Quote, all of my family sat real close together on the couch under a blanket. Dad said this would generate a little heat, but he didn't have to tell us. It seemed like the cold automatically made us want to get together and huddle up. My little sister, Joetta, sat in the middle, and all you could see were her eyes because she had a scarf wrapped around her head. I was next to her, and on the outside was my mother, next to Dad. Sitting with a little space between them was my older brother, Byron, end quote. The Watson family is literally and figuratively close-knit. They're loving. They're always laughing. Our protagonist is 10-year-old Kenny. He's empathetic. He's smart. He's giving. Joetta, who goes by Joey, is a rule follower who wants everyone to remain safe at all times. 13-year-old Byron, who's just beginning his rebellious teenage phase, is protective and sensitive. But everything changes when the Watson family decides to take a road trip south to their grandmother's house in Birmingham, Alabama. It's there that the family is confronted with racism, emotional turmoil, and a defining act of the civil rights era violence, the infamous Ku Klux Klan bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church that would take the lives of 4 little black girls. That's the plot of today's Velshi Band Book Club feature, The Watsons Go to Birmingham 1963 by Christopher Paul Curtis. This beloved children's classic has received numerous awards, including the Newbery and Coretta Scott King Honor. The book is an exploration of a familial love, of historical racism, the power of friendship, mortality, injustice, and the need for generosity and kindness. What the book does so masterfully is it examines both the mechanisms of the civil rights era violence and the feelings surrounding racism, how unfair it is, how unjust, and how inescapable. Although the church bombing is central to the plot of The Watsons Go to Birmingham, it isn't a sad or dark book about a tragedy. It's actually a joyful celebration of a beautiful black family that happens to encounter a very grim moment. And that's by design. The Watsons Go to Birmingham uses juxtaposition to make its point. Kenny's proclivity for generosity and compassion set against the trauma and the vulnerability that he faces in Birmingham. The Watson family's levity, love, and humor set against the heavy and hateful pain of racism. The cold air in Flint, Michigan set against the heat of Birmingham. Over and over, Curtis uses light to make the darkness clear. Since its initial publication in 1995, The Watsons Go to Birmingham is oftentimes the first exposure that many young readers have to the Jim Crow South, certainly to the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing and this country's long history of violent racism. And since its initial publication, it's routinely been banned or challenged. It's been taken off library shelves and then put back on. It's been read in classrooms and then taken off syllabi. The book is beloved for its writing and its characters, especially our young narrator, Kenny. But more than anything else, this book is beloved for the road that it paves over difficult to discuss terrain for parents, for students, and for young readers in America. I'm joined now by the author of The Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963, Christopher Paul Curtis. Welcome, sir, to the Velshi Band Book Club.
Thank you very much, Alice. It's my pleasure to be here.
I have mentioned in many of our Velshi Band Book Club meetings that reading a fictionalized account of an historic event is, for many people, one of the best ways to not only tell the story, but to build genuine empathy. And I just want to read a short passage from your depiction of the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. Quote, I looked into the church and saw smoke and dust flying around like a tornado was in there. One light from the ceiling was still hanging down by a wire, flickering and swinging back and forth. And every once in a while, I could see stuff inside. I could see a couple of grown-ups moving around, looking lost, trying to pick things up. Then the smoke would cover them. Then the bulb would flicker out and they'd disappear. I could see Bibles and coloring books thrown all over the place. Then they'd get covered by the smoke. I could see a shiny, shiny black show lying halfway underneath concrete, and then it got covered with smoke, and the light bulb flickered out again, end quote. I've spent time at that church. I've never experienced it this way. Tell me more about how you explored the true events that took place through fiction for young people.
Well, the story of The Watsons Go to Birmingham started out as a family trip for me, and that's one of the reasons I think it's effective. It's not a story per se about the civil rights movement or about hatred. It's a story of a family and a group of children's reaction to an event that they don't understand. The shoe was from a poem by Dudley Randall, a Detroit poet who wrote the Ballad of Birmingham. And for some reason, I read that when I was very young. That stuck with me throughout the whole time, and I'd forgotten about it. And the book was originally called The Watsons Go to Florida, 1963. Huh. But when they got to Florida, nothing happened. So I set it aside, and then the Ballad of Birmingham came up again, and I said, "Oh, the Watsons need to go to Birmingham," and that changed everything about the story. And I went back and wrote it like that. But what I really wanted to do was show how young people try to deal with tragedies and see things in ways that we as adults don't see. There's a naivety, and Kenny is somebody who can't understand, and he comes up with quick reasons why things are happening. And a lot of times they just don't make sense to us. But I did my best to try to portray a young person's reaction to something so horrible that they couldn't really actually see it.
So let's talk a little bit more about Kenny. He's confronted by a shadowy gray figure 2 times in the story. The first time, he almost drowns at the swimming hole, and then again during the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. This was a masterful way to do what you just described, to explain how children deal with traumatic events. Tell me a little more about this.
That would be the Undertow. It originally started out, it represented death. It was a representation of death. And Kenny would see this thing. Zora Neale Hurston in Their Eyes Were Watching God described death coming, and it was something with square toes, gray with square toes. That image always stuck with me too. So I use that as a representation of death. Kenny sees it when he thinks he's about to die. And I explain to young people when they ask me, what is this about? I say, did he actually see that? I say, your brain, when you're in a horrible situation, will protect you. And it will not let you see what's going on, and it's trying to explain. So Kenny could understand that there was this thing that was trying to pull him under. And then once again, when he went into the church, he couldn't, his brain couldn't handle seeing the bodies of these young girls. And so instead he saw the Undertow again, and the Whirlpool, I'm sorry. That was John Irving, was the Undertow. Mine was the Whirlpool, and Kenny saw the Whirlpool in the church, and it represented death to him. And I think that's the way young people look at things. It's very clear. There's no gray. This was the end, and he knew it.
Toward the end of the book, Kenny again tells his brother Byron that he's ashamed of himself for being scared. You talk about naivete while entering Birmingham's 16th Street Baptist Church after it was bombed, and that he was frustrated by the injustice of racism. So his brother Byron says to Kenny, things ain't ever going to be fair. How's it fair that 2 grown men could hate Negroes so much that they'd kill some kids just to stop them from going to school? How's it fair that even though the cops down there might know who did it, nothing will probably ever happen to those men? It ain't. But you just got to understand that that's the way it is and keep on stepping, end quote. Tell me that, because this is toward the end of the book.
That's where Kenny has, he's gone behind what he calls the world famous Watson Pet Hospital, where their pets in the past, this was in the days before there apparently were veterinarians, as in my youth. My parents told me there were no such things as veterinarians. If an animal was hurt, it went behind the couch, and if it survived, that was fine. And if it didn't, Dad got rid of the. But this was Byron's way of telling Kenny, you've got to come out from behind that couch and get into things. Life's not going to be fair for you, and that's just the way it is. And Byron, many people think the depiction of Byron, well, Kenny's depiction of Byron is that he's a bully and a horrible person. But of course, that's a younger brother's depiction of an older brother. And really, Byron was a sensitive boy in himself.
And that's, I guess, this just gets us back to the first point you make, that it's not about the Birmingham church bombing. It's a remarkable way for kids to get access to that story, but it's still about the family dynamic, and it's wonderful, and I'm really glad that you're here. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for being the newest member of the Velshi Band Book Club. Christopher Paul Curtis, author of numerous novels, including The Watsons Go to Birmingham.